Can I also take you to where we were today and what I opened the program with, which was the situation involving your Senator, Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, and the Senate is going to have a long conversation about whether the Australian flag in the Australian Parliament is a prop, because the Greens say, well, I'll show you, you do that, I'll bring the Palestinian flag in. How do the Greens not know the difference between the two symbols?
Because they're Greens, Paul, and they don't look at the world the way we do, and they appear not to have the patriotism towards our flag that we do. Of course, the Australian flag is welcome in all its forms in both chambers of the Australian Parliament. In fact, I remember recently, or maybe at the beginning of the last Parliament, a great colleague, she's an independent, but she's a great colleague, Dilene Fowler in Western Sydney, actually had a dress made of the Australian flag when she delivered her first speech, and that was welcomed certainly by me. Yeah, she's gorgeous, and it was a wonderful thing. All right, let's talk about the ISIS brides. Very interestingly, some reporting from my colleague Sharry Markson has added a little more detail to the questions that you were asking, and the reporting that was around this morning that, yes, there is another plan to bring another batch of people who left the country to become brides of the caliphate, whose, of course, partners were involved in some of the most vicious things we've heard about on the battlefield. But the Prime Minister is trying to pretend nothing to see here. The information that Sharry had about an hour ago came via a New South Wales parliamentary inquiry, which was a couple of very senior police officers in New South Wales openly discussing how things are being planned for the return, yet the Prime Minister pretended that the story and your question today was incorrect. What's the next stage in getting more information or holding the PM to account for clearly what he did today? Well, great work by Sharry Markson on Sky tonight, breaking an important story which highlights how the Prime Minister, look, if you're being kind, you say he skirted the question. If you're being a little bit more accurate, maybe he even misled the Parliament because he knew exactly what I was asking, Paul. Let's not forget what we're talking about here. These people left Australia willingly to join a death cult that has at its heart the destruction of Australia's way of life and our values and everything that we stand for. Again, I'm reminded this is National Flag Day, and I'm reminded of those values and what we stand for. And to think that this government could be aware and even making preparations for these individuals to come back and not give an honest answer in the National Parliament about what actually happens next. Do these individuals, as we suspect, have to be monitored for the rest of their days in Australia because of the threat that they might pose? Remember that ASIO is telling us that social disharmony is increasing and the threat of terrorism is rising to probable. And somebody coming back with this sort of history, have they changed their minds from when they left Australia, wanting to destroy our way of life? I'm not sure about that. But what I am sure about is that the Prime Minister didn't answer honest questions. I wanted to ask him a simple thing too, will they be met on their return, and will they have proper terrorism threat assessments, and will they face arrest? Because what they committed in leaving Australia to join this death cult was indeed a crime. Well, we know that other people have come back, and we know the model here. We also know that the people who lead at the local level, the mayors in many of these communities where they're going to go back to, openly say they don't want this to take place. So strengthen your hand, and we'll be paying attention to question time tomorrow. Now, on the subject of immigration, for obvious reasons, it continues in conversation. Yesterday, the government comes out and says we're keeping it exactly where we were 12 months before. We're locking in 185,000 this year, and, of course, into last year. Now, I pointed out that one of the frustrations that any person over the age of 30 may have with the sheer size of the Australian population is how dramatically it has changed. 30 years ago, 18 million people lived in the country. 30 years later, it's about 28 million. You go 30 years into the future, and the predictions, if we continue on a high number, starts to push us into the late 30s or the early 40s in terms of millions. Now, it is a nuanced argument. There are plenty of people who want to take the nuance out of the argument. I care not from where people come. We all care about what people bring to the country. But that, in part, is part of the frustration that is being had in and around this issue, which is that, yes, the country behaves differently than it did 30 years ago, but much of the infrastructure does not seem to be up to pace with where we are now, let alone where we'll be in 30 years. That's right, Paul. And the number that was announced yesterday is too high. And by the way, it's too late in the year to actually demonstrate as a government that you've got you understand what you're doing here. This figure should have been relayed to the Australian people months ago. Instead, it's just a rollover of last year's figure. It doesn't come with any explanation of the planning, the infrastructure, the housing and the needs of Australians. So you have to get the balance right. And I'm not hearing anything from this government to prove or demonstrate that they have. Remember, in their first 2 years of government, they brought in close to 1 million migrants with no plan to house them. It's not about the migrants themselves. I'm a migrant to this country, incredibly grateful for the opportunity it gave me and my children for a better life and all of the things that I've been able to work hard for, just like so many migrants. The issue is, what is the government doing about making sure that young Australians have a pathway into their own home, that the infrastructure in our cities is not so congested that the amenity of actually living in our cities is being destroyed because it's not keeping pace. So it's time for an honest conversation, and it's time to include all Australians in that conversation.
Just finally, why does it take the collective power of everyone but Labor in the Parliament to get more places for people who would like to stay at home for as long as possible before they have to go to an aged care facility? Congratulations to yourself, your shadow minister, and the campaign that has been run since we learnt about some specific information about 200,000 people effectively either waiting for the wait list or even fewer of those people that are actually on a wait list. What does it say about the true priorities of a government that it takes the collective scream of everyone else to get basic access to care?
That's right, Paul. I'm very proud of my team and what we were able to achieve on behalf of those elderly Australians. When I sat there in Parliament and I heard the minister say, oh, it's just a short delay from July to November. If you're 97 years old and you're desperate for help and services and just want to feel safe in your own home, this is a generation that built this country, and they're being dismissed as if they can be some budget saving by this government. Because when Senator Ruston fought the fight along with the team in the Senate, they gave in and they acknowledged that they actually could deliver the beginning of these 87,000 places, actually 40,000 more by the end of the year. These are home care packages so that Australians can stay in their own home with the supports that they deserve and they need. And it just was shocking to see this government walk away from promises that they'd made, empty promises, to support elderly Australians and their aged care. So, yeah, very proud of my team. We're not going to stop here, Paul, by the way, because, yes, we've got 40,000 more home care packages between now and the end of the year, but that's not enough. And we've just found out that the waiting list is actually even bigger. 25,000 more people than we were informed of. So, you know, there's work to be done, and we'll keep doing it on behalf of the people that we're here for.
Well, thank you for doing it. Go get him. Sussan Ley, lovely to talk to you. We'll see you very soon.